Sand all parts with a foam sanding block. Cut out your ailerons with a sharp razor. Bevel the leading edge of the aileron, noting the center line. Heat a piece of wire from your scrap pile with a torch, and carefully melt a hole through the fuselage for the torque rod. Carefully cut slots for the aileron hinges, and hinge your aileron. Place brass tube over aileron torque rod and bend as per diagram. Wax the entire torque rod. Fill the entire slot occupied by the aileron torque rod with 5-minute epoxy and filler. Secure nylon nose gear bearing to plywood. Epoxy plywood nose gear mount to plane using the nose gear wire to ensure alignment. Mount 3 servos in position indicated on the plane using the hardwood supplied. Screw on the 440 nylon aileron connectors and break aileron torque rods free in epoxy bearings. If they stick, a slight amount of oil can be used. Cut all push rods to length. Drill hole and lay out throttle push rod in position so that 3/4 of it extends past the outside of the fuselage. Make a Z-bend for the aileron push rods. Epoxy all your push rods in at this time. Using the diagram, bend the nose wheel linkage. Check that your ailerons work freely and smoothly. Plumb the fuel tank and wrap it in foam supplied with a kit. Drill holes for fuel lines in positions marked just in front of the engine mount blocks. Connect the fuel lines to the tank, being sure to mark which is pressure and which is fuel. The optional fuel tank system may be installed at this time. An antenna tube may be installed if so desired. Heat a scrap piece of wire and make a hole for the elevator push rod through the bottom of the fuselage hatch. Glue in the push rod with 5-minute epoxy and filler. Note the position of the end of the push rod. Install the nut and bolt on the brass tube. Glue stabilators to brass with 5-minute epoxy and filler. Be sure they are absolutely straight. Be sure the bolt is on the left side and is 90 degrees to the table. Let dry. Apply car wax heavily to the stabilizer brass tube. Let dry at least 10 minutes and do not buff off when dry. Put bottom fuselage piece on main fuselage and check fit. Sand if necessary. Glue bottom fuselage piece to main piece with 30-minute epoxy and filler. Be sure to put plenty of epoxy in both outer bearing areas of stabilizers. Work quickly, but be sure and get epoxy in all cracks and crevices where the fuselage hatch meets. Put epoxy into fuselage hatch bearings. Fit hatch to main fuselage and tape in place. Let dry at least 2 hours. Epoxy main landing gear blocks into place with 5-minute epoxy and filler. Epoxy hardwood tail skid block into place with 5-minute epoxy. Drill 5 30-second holes and mount landing gear. Cut the hatch 3 3/16 from the front and glue into place with 5-minute epoxy. Epoxy your 1/8 by 1/4 spruce stick in the hatch groove. Drill a 1/16 inch hole in the dowel supplied. This is your hold down for your hatch. Epoxy it into place. Glue hardwood engine mounts in position with plenty of 5-minute epoxy and filler. Poke holes in foam to give the epoxy something to hold on to. Drill holes for your engine mounts. Your engine mount may need some carving if your case is wide on your engine. Note the prop clearance to the back end of the fuselage. Cut your elevator so your prop goes by freely. Set up your throttle. Set up your elevator. Glue your vertical stabilizers on at this time. Use plenty of epoxy. A fillet around the vertical is desired. Note that the vertical is square to the table and to the plane. Paint your pilot as desired. Install your seat and dash. Paint flat black and install the pilot. Epoxy the canopy in at this time. Tape off canopy with pinstripe tape along panel lines and electrical tape for the rest. Paint flat black so panel lines look black from inside. Smear lightweight spackling over entire plane with a spreader. It might help to thin the spackle with a little water. Let dry overnight. Final sand your aircraft and paint as desired using a foam acceptable paint. Cut out your fins for your bombs and missiles, and install in the missiles. Repeat the same procedure for the bombs. Epoxy your two halves for your fuel tanks. Paint the missiles gloss white. The bombs and fuel tanks are usually painted the same color as the plane. Realistic paint jobs do take time, but are well worth the effort. An exhaust diverter may be added to your engine by using brass and soldering. Balance your F15. Mount your sparrows to the side of the fuselage. Set your aileron and elevator travels at 3/4 of an inch up and 3/4 down. Adjust your F15 until it rolls straight. Satisfied with the rolling, taxi test may now start. Power up and then let off the gas and roll straight until it slows. Once satisfied with taxi test, the flight may begin. Be sure and check all your flight surfaces and your engine is running good and properly. Roll down the runway and add full power. And start adding an elevator until she lifts off. If for some reason your engine goes dead stick, remember one thing: maintain energy. Nose your aircraft over and keep the airspeed up, flaring at the last few feet. Successful dead stick landings can be made, but these procedures must be followed. Jets lose energy fast. Nosing the aircraft over will maintain energy. Flare the aircraft when it's just a few feet off the ground. Your engine thrust line may be checked by flying vertical and noting which way your jet pitches. This F-15's thrust line is right on.
Yeah.
Good throttle control is the key to good landings.